I don't get too excited over hardware launches these days, but when I heard about the Steam Deck, my hype levels were over 9,000. I couldn't wait to order mine, but as fate would have it, Valve servers weren't in my favor, and I was stuck with a Q1 and then Q2 ETA. This is my unboxing, initial impressions, and the story of how, against all odds, I got a launch week Steam Deck. Let's get into it. What's good, Deck Gang? I know it's a cheeky title, and if you watch my videos, you basically already know the whole story, but I thought that this unboxing video was a good opportunity to reflect. I do want to mention though that I'm still trying to get a proper YouTuber setup, so my video quality may vary. I may need to buy some gear, so I'll ask you a favor here. If you believe in what I'm doing and have just a little extra cash, consider making a pledge on Patreon. If you want to tie your pledge to a personal request for me to test something on the Steam Deck, I can definitely do that, but please check with me before you give up your hard-earned cash. Feel free to use my latest Patreon post to make a request. Okay, so story time. This is a story of how really strong interests of mine combined into something greater than the sum of its parts. It starts back in early 2018 when I began to notice I could no longer keep track of new and interesting games. I started a project that I called Notable Releases to kind of see how many interesting games were coming out per day. I would make a tweet thread every single day. Eventually, I wanted to let people know which of these I actually recommend, so I started a Notable Releases YouTube channel later that year. On that channel, I would give some impressions to come up with the most interesting releases of that week. It was a lot of work, and I had 2 small children, so ultimately I burned out. 2 small kids also made it harder to play video games. I could never find time at my desktop and was even struggling to find time on my laptop, so the Switch became my primary device. I loved it, even though I missed the Steam library. A year and a half later, it's mid-2020, my kids are older, everyone's stuck at home, and as far as gaming goes, I'm back in the swing of things. I was playing more video games than ever, and I really wanted a way to play my Steam library on a handheld. Thankfully, this coincided with the Indiegogo campaign for the GPD Win Max. It arrived a few months later, and it took my gaming to another level. Finally, I could play my Steam library as conveniently as the Switch library. Then, after months of rumors, the Steam Deck was announced. Quite literally, I couldn't contain my excitement. I couldn't wait to order my own. So there I was, July 16th. It was time to order the Steam Deck. The hour was approaching, my trigger finger was ready, and I had the hubris of someone who was able to score a PS5 damn near on demand. But the Valve servers buckled under the weight of every nerd trying to reserve their very own Game Gear. After nearly an hour of attempts, including trying to pay multiple times, I was locked out. Feeling resigned, I tried on an alternate Steam account that I set up for my son, and finally, it was done. My Steam Deck was reserved for the first quarter of 2022. In the coming months, I couldn't shake wanting to return to YouTube, nor could I stop thinking about the Steam Deck. So I decided to go for it. Make a YouTube channel entirely based on the Steam Deck. When you start a creative journey like this, you sometimes let your imagination run wild with the possibilities. Maybe I can get monetized this time. Maybe I can get to 5,000 subs. Maybe if I do really well, I can even get a Steam Deck early. Nah. But I did reach 1,000 subs, then 2,000. Then before I knew it, I was at 5,000 right after the deck got delayed. Suddenly, 10K before launch seemed within reach. I felt gratitude, and in some ways, I felt like I owed it to you, the viewer, to do everything in my power to get a timely Steam Deck so that I can continue to make the best videos possible. So I decided that I would leave it all on the floor. I would aim for 10K while doing my damnedest to convince Valve that I meant business. I put a pitch deck together and I contacted anyone I could think of, more than once, and I got back nothing for weeks. Eventually, someone said that they would forward me to the right person, but after that, again, radio silence. And in the end, I don't know what was the turning point. I don't know what I did that finally netted me a response. Maybe it was reaching 10K, Maybe it was a particular video. Maybe enough of you advocated for me. Or maybe it was just letting time run its course. But finally, I got the response I was looking for. Richard, we might be able to get you a Steam Deck. It was music to my ears. But here's the thing, even though I don't know the specifics, I do believe in my heart of hearts that my sheer will was a significant factor. I saw a goal in my mind and I worked backwards to think of different ways to make it possible. Even after my chances appeared to be zero, I didn't quit. And that's what I wanted to convey today. It's important to be practical and logical, but also don't be afraid to dream. Take the impossible and break it up into smaller, more possible parts. You won't be able to control the outcome, but you can control the input. Alright, enough navel gazing, yeah? Let's get to the meat and potatoes. Hopefully you're enjoying the unboxing so far. Valve sent out a mix of 256 and 512 models to reviewers, and I was surprised to see that I got a 512. Really awesome stuff. It felt wonderful in my hands. The only mildly surprising thing when I first picked it up was that everything was just a bit smaller than I expected it to be. Particularly the ABXY buttons are smaller than they would be on an Xbox controller and more closely resemble the size of the buttons on a Steam controller. Still much more comfortable than the Switch, of course. The analog sticks also felt like they were just millimeters smaller than the average console controller. The paddles felt fine to reach, but I definitely hit them accidentally during play. For that reason, I haven't started enabling them and using them yet, but I definitely would like to eventually. I plugged the system in as Valve recommended, and within 30 seconds the system booted up on its own. After that, it took about a minute to get to the initial language selection screen. You can see I played around with the camera settings here so that you can see the text on screen. After selecting your language, you pick your time zone and enter your Wi-Fi information. At this point, there's a 5-minute installation. Afterwards, you're brought back to the language selection screen, but it remembers your answers, so you just have to click through until you get to the Steam login screen. Then it takes 30 seconds to load your data and ta-da, you get a peek at your Steam library. There's a guided tutorial to walk you through the Steam button, quick access button, volume, and power buttons. Okay, so here I skipped a step. I should have went straight to apply system updates, but I didn't. I guess I just wanted to play some games. For what it's worth, the initial system update includes a BIOS update. It doesn't take long, but you'll see a weird looking BIOS update screen. It's fine. Anyway, you might be able to guess what I installed. Grapple Dog. I didn't realize that there were no cloud saves for Grapple Dog, so I was surprised to see a blank slate. Nonetheless, I went ahead and played that for a bit. So far, everything worked great. When I got a chance, I installed a few games for my testing suite. Mostly, I wanted to test controls, more so than compatibility and performance. So I downloaded Street Fighter 4 and 5, Lonely Planet Remix, Spelunky 2, Aperture Desk Job, and Elden Ring. Between Grapple Dog and Spelunky 2, platformer controls were feeling solid on either the analog stick or the D-pad. But now it was time for a real D-pad test, Street Fighter 4. There's a move in Street Fighter 4 called a Focus Attack Dash Cancel Ultra, and it's a really good test because it involves a lot of inputs in quick succession. You do a Shoryuken, then a focus attack by holding 2 buttons, then you tap forward twice to dash out of the focus attack, and finally a double fireball for the Ultra before your opponent lands on the ground. If you played SF4, chances are you have those inputs burned into your mind and hands. I was never very good at it, but I was good enough to test, I think. The results were not so great. I was pulling it off maybe 5% of the time, but when I connected my DualSense, I was able to get it much more like a quarter of the time. I don't have a root cause, and it could be as simple as needing to build that muscle memory. I'd be curious to see how other people fare as they get their hands on the deck. I mentioned connecting DualSense, and that was easy. You hit the Steam button, find the settings menu, then Bluetooth, and put your DualSense in pairing mode. I had to enable the show all devices flag to see the DualSense, but once I saw it, I clicked it and it was ready to go. Then you just have to rearrange controller order in the quick access menu in order to make the DualSense player 1. Finally, I played Lonely Planet Remix. I used this as a way to test my shooter controls. I enabled gyro and trackpad. It took a while to find my personal settings and get reacclimated, By default, trackpads use a trackball-like input. It has momentum, so you can do a fast flick-like swipe, then release your finger, and your character will continue to turn in that direction for a small amount of time. I prefer a more one-to-one input, so I disabled trackball mode. In the end, the challenge was still quite a bit harder than mouse and keyboard, but it was leagues ahead of using a dual analog. Otherwise, I didn't venture outside of the Steam Deck sandbox. I barely tweaked performance or used the awesome game scope features. I didn't go to desktop mode or even install emulators. I just played some motherfucking games. It was wonderful. By staying on the golden path, I didn't encounter too much friction. That's not to say it was a perfect experience. I did find some weird bugs. For example, when I went to update my machine, it gave me an unknown error. That's gut-wrenching because it was an indication that I may need to re-image this device. I'm still getting this message for what it's worth, but it was able to find and apply an update, so I'm kind of just crossing my fingers and hoping it goes away. Thankfully, there is a Steam OS 3.0 image out there now, but I'd really rather not have to deal with that so soon. Another gripe I had was that the game scope settings persisted from game to game. I can see why some would prefer this, but I would prefer to have per game settings. For example, I want a 30 FPS limiter on Elden Ring, but on Street Fighter, it's just unplayable with that limiter. I forgot I had it on and was wondering why such a low spec game like Street Fighter was running so poorly. And finally, playing when docked felt a bit subpar. I didn't really have any control over my resolution. The game plays in a compositor window at 800p and then gets upscaled automatically to the native resolution of your monitor. I wanted to use dock mode as a way to capture the 800p footage, but the Steam Deck HUD was rendering at 4K, making it impossible to record the way I wanted to. That's fine, but I kind of just want the option to output at whatever resolution I want without having to go into desktop mode. And the last gripe I'll mention has nothing to do with my first few days playing the Steam Deck. Lately, a lot of games are getting rated as unsupported, and these are games that should play well on deck. I haven't installed some of these yet, but I will. Mostly, I'd like to know what's going on. Why are games like Tekken and Arkham Asylum getting rated as unsupported? It doesn't really make sense. I'd previously noticed some other oddities, like the claim that LEGO Star Wars doesn't support external controllers for multiplayer, despite the fact that it absolutely does. So, from my limited perspective, it feels like the Deck Verify program might be a tad immature and is going through its first growing pains. So that's going to do it for this time. I saw all your requests in my last video and I'm going to try my best to address as many of them as possible. I'm excited to put this device through its paces. If you want to move your requests to the top of my priority list, again, consider making a pledge on Patreon. Since Nintendo is taking down emulation videos, I may have to make some of my upcoming emulation videos a Patreon exclusive. But don't worry, I'll let you know if it comes to that. Alright, until next time, Deck Gang out. Goodbye!